Okay. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another session of the WSA Friday webinars. I'm really looking forward to this one. We've got a session on foiling. We've got three really avid SUP foilers here for you to talk about what's happening in the industry, how probably best to get into it. The usual way that it works is we encourage you to send your questions via the chat button, which is bottom right of your screen. If you could use that one rather than the Q&A, that would be great. I'll compare the evening. I'll try not to interject too much, but please send your questions through. If I should manage to not get around to your question, I apologize now, because with some of these webinars, the questions come in thick and fast, and the thread gets moved down really quickly, but I'm not too bad at it. It's scheduled for about an hour. We may go over that, we may not. So please do send through the questions. I'll get the guys to introduce themselves in a minute. So we have Matt Barker, and we have Marie Buchanan, and we have Ben Pye. So I'm going to go over to you guys now. So maybe we can kick off with you, Matt. If you could just give us a little brief introduction as to your SUP history and how you got into foiling, and then we'll move on to Marie. So over to you.
Evening, everyone who's watching. I'm Matt. Pleased to meet you all. I hope you find this informative. So Chris has invited myself and a couple of other crew to talk about foiling today. My background, surfing was my first and foremost. Then I got into SUP, and that developed, and SUP surfing became a big passion for me. And then I had seen foiling on a French YouTube movie or something like that, and I'd looked at it and gone, nah. And like with most people that have got into foiling, it was that one clip of Kai Lenny on some mutant hybrid chop down raceboard that just opened my eyes all of a sudden to riding ocean swell, and just the freedom of flying. So from that day forward, I was besotted and got myself a setup. Took to the SUP side of things because of my background in SUP surfing. So I've won 3 sort of back-to-back British championships in SUP surfing. Haven't really done much competitive SUP surfing. Over the last couple of years, I've just been besotted with SUP foiling. Done a little bit of prone foiling as well, which is paddling in using your hands, and also sort of not done a huge amount, but done a bit of winging. I'm sure when Ben and Marie kick in, they'll tell you a little bit more about winging, but I have done a little bit of winging, and we offer e-foil experience. So those of you who don't know what e-foil is, it's electric hydrofoil. So everything is controlled by a handheld remote. It's a bit of a cheat, but it's one of the easiest ways to learn how to foil. Foiling is quite difficult. So that's me for now. I'll pass over to Marie.
Thank you, Matt.
Hello. Thank you. Hello, good evening, everyone. My name's Marie. I'm based in South Devon. I began foiling a couple of years ago. I've got a background in windsurfing, and I was like Matt. I looked at it and I thought, it's not really for me, but I thought I'd have a go. And immediately I was hooked. Just the sensation of gliding in the air, and the actual, it's really peaceful compared to windsurfing. Windsurfing is quite a hectic sport, and when you're up in the air on the foil, everything's silent, and it just irons out all the bumps, and it's a completely different sensation to windsurfing. So then obviously I progressed on to the SUP, because my background is SUP racing and SUP surfing, and winging as well. So I think my wind foiling really gave me got me to get used to how to use the foil and how to pump the foil, and then the transition to the wing and then the SUP foiling, I think, became easier. Unlike some people who learn behind a boat and get towed behind a boat, I haven't actually gone through that process. So, but I think the windsurfing is definitely the easiest way to get into the foiling if you're a windsurfer, obviously. But I'm yet to try being towed behind a boat. So that's me.
Thank you very much, Marie. Over to you, Ben.
I'm Ben. I'm based in North Devon, and pretty much started foiling. I'd say I started sup foiling about a year ago, around March, April time last year. My foiling experience started windsurfing. Had a quick go with windsurf foiling. Pretty much all grew from, just like Matt said, that video. I think it's about 3 or 4 years ago now, of Kai Lenny, and basically from that video, I was pretty much hooked, and watching that, and knew that I wanted to have a go, and it looked super cool. So yeah, so started sup foiling about a year ago, mostly self-taught in the surf. I had one brief session behind the boat to kind of get the grips of it, which helped a lot, I think, massively, and I'd really recommend that way to learn to foil. So pretty much self-taught in the surf, and then progressed on. Now I'm getting really into the winging and trying to progress my downwind foiling as well. But yeah, loving it. So it's all a learning curve, which keeps me hooked, and that's what I love.
Yeah, well, thank you very much, Ben. I mean, there's quite a lot to talk about this evening. You've mentioned wing foiling, downwind foiling. Matt, you've mentioned prone foiling, e-foiling. So I'm really looking forward to listening and hearing about your experiences with that. I think the kickoff question would be, what would be the best way to get into foiling? If I walked into your shop, Matt, and said, look, I want to foil. I've seen this Kai Lenny chap, and it looks fantastic. So can you help me out? What would you recommend?
I would first, I'd scrutinize someone's skill set, because obviously learning to foil does have its dangers. I know that even with the experience that I've had getting in the surf, I was effing and swearing at myself when I was in that environment, going, what am I doing? This is, if I pick this thing up, as you can see, there's sharp bits, there's bits that can hurt, and you can land on it. So I would scrutinize someone's skill set, and I'd ask them what short sup technique, what sort of short sup boards they've been on, and then I'd look at their weight. I'd look at what type of foiling that they want to do. Some people might say downwind foiling. They might like the expanse of the ocean. I'd ask them about their location. Are there suitable foiling waves that they've seen around there? So there's so many questions that you'd want to ask a wannabe foiler.
Can I just interject 1 minute? Are you suggesting that then ideally people coming to foiling, and this is open to the panel, should really have some experience in waves, or at least as a stand-up paddleboarder, and be reasonably proficient before we even consider jumping on a foil, for some of the reasons that you've mentioned, Matt? What's your thoughts on that, Marie?
I think it definitely helps, but then it depends on what you want to use the foil for. If you're talking sup foiling, then basically, other than your paddle, you're harnessing the energy from the sea and the ocean and the bumps and the waves. So it definitely helps if you've got background in surfing, I think. But if your aim, I mean, I know a lot of people that I've talked to at the beach today, actually, and they're keen to get into the wing foiling. And in that case, obviously, the wind is your energy. So as long as you can harness that energy up through the foil, then you don't really need to be able to surf, I would say. So it depends on what kind of foiling you intend to do.
So you've came at it, Marie, with having the added benefit of both skill sets then, really, because a very proficient stand-up paddleboarder, used to being in the sup surfing world, and also very proficient on the windsurfer. So you've had a head start, and maybe that explains why you didn't have to jump behind the boat, because your skill set is probably quite different to most of us that want to get into this new sport.
But I would say even with that skill set, the sup surfing side of things and the sup foiling was definitely the hardest, and I'm still trying to get to grips with that, to be honest. It's a lot about understanding what, for example, if you go out in the waves, and the waves are the energy, they're providing you with the energy, then you need to understand what waves are suitable for the foil. you know, pitching waves aren't great for learning on. Actually, onshore mush is I find is the best for foiling. So yeah, I guess having an understanding of surfing is definitely helpful.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Matt, you were about to kick in there with something. What were you about to say?
I suppose it's just balance, really. It's those that have gone through surfing to a high standard or SUP to a high standard have sort of initiated muscle tendons that maybe someone who's got into SUP from an inflatable background, you know, on a very big stable board. When you're on a hydrofoil, if I take my phone, for example, you've got these different pitches. You've got nose to tail, got rail to rail, and you've got roll, which is pitch, roll, and yaw, which is the same axis of an aeroplane. So it scrutinizes your balance so much. So that's why, back to your question, when you're asking me, if someone walks in, if they're coming in just to buy equipment, I'm obviously going to quiz them. If they're willing to get some instruction, I've obviously taught. I had an overhead cable system. I've taught behind a boat. I've taught with elastics. I've got an elastic here, braided bungee cord, and obviously the e-foil. And the e-foil is by far the easiest way for someone who maybe has only stood on an inflatable board to come in to get an opportunity to try foiling within an hour and a half and come away with some experience.
Well, I'm super keen to hear about some of the kit that you guys are using, and maybe if we can save that for just a little bit later. Ben, I'd like to just bring you into the conversation. I wasn't sure whether it was yourself or Matt who said you did start by having a little bit of a session behind a boat. And are you a windsurfer as well? Sorry.
Yeah, so I started, the first ever session I had on my own foil kit was basically behind a boat. Yeah, I think it definitely helps you to learn, like Matt said, to learn. If you've only got a short amount of time, it definitely helps to learn just that, like that lift of the foil, coming up on the foil, what that feels like. I mean, for me, I'm a windsurfer and a kite surfer as well. So I started off, actually the first ever foil session I had was on windsurf foil. But I think for me, trying windsurf foiling, and now I'm more into windsurf foiling and also a bit of kite foiling as well. I think those two are different kind of foiling sensations to like SUP foiling, because I think they're at higher speeds and a lot more about trimming and kind of balancing the foil than also having to think about generating your own speed, because you've got that kite or that sail to kind of pull you along, which is the same as the wing now. For me, I think it definitely, like going back to what Marie said about learning in kind of mushier onshore waves, I think it definitely helps. I was pretty much just willing to kind of sacrifice pretty much the whole of last year just to learn to foil, and I took a lot of time out of other things that I was doing, and sacrificed a lot of surf sessions just persevering to learn. And I think that is probably one of the things, or the best ways really. But yeah,
I think you know, I have personally had a SUP foil session behind a boat probably 2.5 years ago now, and completely wrong setup, and having come from surfing for a very, very long time, shall we say, and reasonably proficient on a SUP surfboard, no windsurfing background. I was rather like Matt. There was a lot of effing and blinding, the speed, the setup was wrong. I actually fell on the foil, put me off a little bit, but then all of a sudden it kind of clicked. So I think we're getting an understanding now that there's several options for us to possibly consider of how we can get into the foiling, the boat, the windsurfing background, as you've mentioned, the e-foil. Before we go any further, would you guys recommend that if anyone's going to go out there and possibly just jump on it, would you recommend wearing of any safety gear? I'm just going to just speaking from personal experience. I fell on the foil. The next time I did it, I was wearing different gear. But what's your thoughts on advising someone to wear some safety gear, and what would that be?
Yeah, for sure. I think helmet, impact vest is definitely, obviously, if you're going surfing or foiling or whatever, you're probably going to be wearing a wetsuit anyway, which is going to give you a certain degree of protection. But an impact vest, a helmet is definitely recommended. Almost, yeah, I'd say for definite, go out with a helmet and an impact vest. Matt would probably be able to give a little bit more insight on that, because I think he's had a bit more experience teaching than me. But yeah.
Yeah, first time out for me, definitely. So even with the experience that I've had, this is a different beast. So I wore a helmet and an impact vest just in case. And I went out to a spot which I knew was suitable for foiling, and there was no one else around. Obviously, there were people that could have rescued me if something had happened. But yeah,
I think the message here also, which is Ben touched on there, is anyone coming into foiling, don't expect to be proficient at this within 2 weeks. I think, Ben, you said you pretty much dedicated a whole year to it. I've got a very good friend in Cornwall. That's all he does now. And I think, Matt, you're pretty much spending most of your time foiling, but even, you know, with you guys and your proficient skill levels, this is not something that happens overnight, and we have to be prepared to dedicate a lot of time to it. Marie, how long have you been actually foiling?
Well, I started windsurf foiling 2 years ago, and then I dabbled with sup foiling the start of last summer, and then I broke my foot, so I had some time off the water, and then had a big break from it, really, and picked it up when I was in Australia over the winter, using a different set of kit. And so actually it was really good using some different types of foils, and that really helped me to understand what the foil did and the differences that a high aspect and a low aspect foil did, you know, how that affected your performance. So that was a really good learning thing for me. And then more recently, obviously after lockdown, I've stepped back onto the sup foil, had my first session this week. And actually, yeah, no, it's, I think I found that foiling, wing foiling has really helped my sup foiling. So with the wing foiling, especially if you go out in light airs and you're required to pump to actually keep the board, you know, in the air, then that really hones your skills for the sup surfing, because you do need to be able to pump the board, I think, in the surf to help you get up.
So before we move on to the kit aspect of it, because we're already getting a few questions coming through, if we've touched briefly on the type of waves that we need. Somebody choosing a location to go foiling, i.e. they haven't got the boat, maybe they've got the luxury of the e-foil. What kind of conditions are you recommending that people choose? What's some key safety points as well? With obviously they're not going to rack up at Fistral as a first-time foiler in the middle of August. Well, possibly some people will, but what can you guys advise to people?
I think,
to the panel.
Yeah, so I think look for a kind of big empty beach break on a small day, maybe. So like this time of year is kind of perfect because you don't tend to get big storms or anything like that. So we tend to get fairly smallish surf. Like a day, I'd say kind of 1 to 2 foot, mushy, fairly flat beach break that isn't any steep sections or a fast wave. So for me, like in North Devon here, we've got Saunton Sands, which is perfect for it. Big break, loads of space. So walk completely down the beach. So I'm completely on my own, pretty much 200 meters from anyone else. So completely avoid everyone is for sure a recommendation. I'd say that is essential. Watch where you're doing it. Watch for shallow parts. Maybe assess the beach at low tide if you can before your session. That's what I always try and do if I'm going to anywhere new. I just try and look out for hazards that might be there. And yeah, just be wary and use common sense, I'd say, for sure. Things don't ride too far in because obviously it gets shallow and then there's a risk of hitting your foil and on the sand or the bottom or whatever. So
it's an expensive bit of kit to break.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
so Matt, you're obviously based up on the Gower. Would you tend to agree there with Ben? I mean, you've got an awful lot of beaches to choose from. I think a key point there that Ben mentioned was assessing the beaches that we're going to use through the different stages of the tide. And any other key points that you have to add to that?
What like Ben said, knowledge of the area. So if there's a wave that you think that might be suitable, it's one that you've already assessed. When I first started, exploring new foiling spots around the Gower coast, I'd use my paddle as a depth gauge all around the area of takeoff to check, and sometimes my foil does still hit the bottom, but you are super vigilant of your foil hitting the bottom on takeoff. Obviously that you want to have knowledge of the spot, so generally if you've surfed there before, hopefully you know how the wave's going to break and you know that it might be a fat wave. Ben mentioned beach breaks. Most of the places that I foil, there are some beach breaks, but they tend to be more sort of point break style beach breaks that break into a deeper channel. That's beneficial because generally foils can go where surfboards can't. So you're riding a lump of ocean moving swell. So some of the spots I foil are actually reef breaks, but the wave will also tease and feather over not a shallow bottom, but obviously rock, and then feather slightly and then continue rolling as well. So
what I think that we're finding here is that foiling is opening up a whole load of new spots really to you guys that previously you would have bypassed. You probably wouldn't have surfed. I'm not asking you to give away your secret spots. People have got to go out there and find these locations. But Marie, I believe you do a lot of your foiling, I believe, in the Bantham area. Correct me if I'm wrong. But I know Bantham is everybody knows about Bantham, Marie. I know Bantham is a particularly busy place at the best of times. But is there enough room at that location to spread yourself out? And Ben made a very good point there, saying he's at least 200 meters away from any other water users, because the last thing we want is a foil board coming through the lineup.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think even at Bantham, it does get very busy, but foiling just allows you to use the section that most people don't want to use, basically, because it's a gutless wave, in the middle, and generally all the foilers congregate in that area. So it's still, even in a busy break, it allows you to get out of the way of everyone and pick a spot which is brilliant for foiling and not particularly great for surfing on. So I find it's
interesting there, Marie. You said all the foilers. So are you seeing a growth, or is it just maybe you and a mate? I mean, how many foilers are you guys all seeing and girls seeing a growth in people foiling now? Is it becoming more prominent?
Oh, for sure. I mean, there's prone foiling has become very popular, and we see more and more sup foilers. I find the sort of river mouth is really good because it's a gentle wave, and actually you can carry on with the wave for ages if you're skilled enough, and it does allow you to use the spaces where other surfers aren't particularly interested in. So
but there are a growth there. You are seeing a growth then, Marie?
Well, I mean, I don't, it's there's not sort of vast numbers of foilers out, but it's definitely, people are definitely interested in it. It's obviously very visual and looks different, and I think it's capturing people's imagination for sure.
Well, I'm very aware that quite a few of the traditional prone surfers are now taken to foiling. A good friend, Martin Shalabra, runs Discovery Surf School. I mean, that's all he pretty much does now. Ben, I mean, you live in an area which is pretty heavily populated with surfers. Are you finding some of the prone surfers moving across to the foiling?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, some of the guys, even some of the pretty well-known surfers that we have around our area, like Andrew Cotton, for example, who lives in our area, and he's getting really into foiling. He was out foiling the other night at Saunton Sands, and yeah, I mean, for me, pretty much the last year, foiling has pretty much become all that I've been doing, especially this wing foiling now. All this wind we've had over the winter, I've been using it a lot and getting out a lot. I haven't really surfed a lot, mostly just been focusing on learning the foil and just trying to get as good as I can. And also just because that is all I've wanted to do, pretty much, been addicted from the start. So yeah.
And Matt, interestingly, I saw you nodding your head there when I asked the question, are you seeing a lot more people getting into foiling, which I assume is good for business for you, being a retailer in this? Could you, over the last 12 months, should we say, I mean, obviously we've had a bit of a blip with something called COVID. I think that's what it's called. I wouldn't know. Are you seeing a lot more people?
Yeah, it's obviously you have to be a little bit open-minded. I had an ex-Welsh champion on the phone yesterday, surfing champion, talking about foiling. So around the Gower coast, even though it's very good for surfing, it's always been very surf orientated. And I'm not saying that people aren't open-minded, because it's also a cost factor, but I've seen, I'm selling lots of kit onto the East Coast. Lots of people on that East Coast of the UK into foiling, small pockets in Scotland, South Coast, South Coast, kite surfing mecca, and then lots of waves that, places that don't really get, proper swell, lots of wind swell. So there's massive growth potential down there. Obviously Cornwall, there's always going to be, obviously, the birthplace of surfing in the UK, if you like. There's always going to be a bit of a spike, but there's also a very strong surfing community. So, and into Europe as well. I'm shipping foils, sending stuff to Italy and Oman. I've got, customers worldwide who are sort of buying up. So it is definitely growing. Sold an e-foil board day before yesterday to a guy in Finland. So yeah, people want this experience. And the social media videos of people foiling, you just can't help but just jaw drop. Every single day someone does something that makes me go, oh, what? The potential. Everyone needs to be on a foil, even though whether or not they can afford to. But the feeling is just like, we only live once. And the feeling, as you can attest, Chris, is just, I'm completely, 3 years I've been on this train and I'm not getting off.
Totally hooked. So let's open up the discussion with a little bit now regarding equipment and the various kinds of stuff. So as a beginner, and I class myself thoroughly as not a complete novice. I've had a go, as I mentioned, behind a boat with all the wrong setups on probably the wrong boards, old SUP surfboards. So what would you recommend is a good foil board to start with? Let's say for someone like me, and I don't mind saying I think I'm about 86 kgs at the minute, 6 foot tall, reasonably proficient with balance. I notice how much this kit is changing and evolving, and it seems to be as we get better, or as you get better at it, you're able to ride smaller and smaller. But an entry-level board, what would you recommend for someone like me? So 6 foot, 86, 7, maybe a little bit more kgs.
Well, I saw a message, someone saying, what do you think of the 4-in-1 boards? And Starboard sell the 4-in-1 boards. They've been very popular. Nothing wrong with the 4-in-1 boards. You obviously are sacrificing a little bit of weight, but do they work? Definitely. You could even use a board that you might not use so much. I think it needs to be a board that you're comfortable with. It really generally probably doesn't want to be any longer than 8'5" in length, and a suitable volume for you. So say for you, Chris, what was your weight again?
Around about 86, 7. Something like that, Kate.
And you're probably comfortable paddling a 100-litre board?
On a good day, Matt.
Okay. So if I was recommending for you, I'd probably say 130, 140 of a parallel shape. So I think me, Ben and Marie all have boards behind us, and I can see that every single one of those boards doesn't have a pointy nose, it has a shovel nose, so it's square. And that means you can go shorter but retain stability. Is that right?
Yes. So there was a general misconception, I think, when we started, that we needed to have quite big boards because it would aid in balance, when really we don't need that at all, because we're on the foil, we're surfing the foil, aren't we? And a board of too big a length is really is more of a hindrance, and especially in a windy condition, I guess. So the board that you have behind you there, Matt, I see. So that's a Takuma. So you've got some straps on there as well. Would you be recommending foot straps to start with, or as we progress?
No, not to start with. I'll put this, I'll say to everyone now what board I started on and the size of it, and then we can go to Ben so that people get an idea, and then we can continue going, because I've been through quite a few boards and I'm sure the other guys have too. So I started on an ATO retrofitted. That means it was a surf sup, and I got boxes installed for it. An ATO by 31.5 starboard hypernut with a volume of 130 litres-ish. Ben?
So I started on the starboard hyperfoil 7.2 by 27.5. It's 125 litres, so it's a dedicated foil board designed specifically for foiling, which is the same as this one here, so up here. So yeah, it's obviously 125 litres is a lot bigger than the volume I'd normally ride. I surfs up a 70 litre board, so way too big for me, but I knew it would be stable and pretty much ticked all the boxes for learning. So yeah, I also went on the 4-in-1. So Matt mentioned the 4-in-1. I think there's a comment there, like he said, about it, and that's pretty much where I've been progressing my windsurf foiling on, is the 4-in-1 a lot recently. So it actually works really well, I find. I'm using that still, windsurf foiling, and I don't have a problem with it. I don't think it has any limitations at the moment for me, windsurf foiling. But yeah, so I'd recommend definitely try and go for a dedicated foil board. It will make a big difference. Yeah,
and Marie, I see your board there as starboard, which we would expect. So what kind of kit did you start on, and what are you riding now?
So when I started, obviously, as a windsurfer, I used a 122 litre board, which is actually quite a big windsurfing board for me. But that allowed me to get to grips. It gave me enough stability to be able to get to grips with the foil and how the foil worked. But then when I stepped onto a sup foil, I actually stepped straight onto the hypernut, which is the same board that I actually use for sup surfing. So this is a 2-in-1 board, I guess you'd call it, the hyperfoil. And it's only 92 litres, but I was already used to that. So I think that's perhaps why I found it quite challenging to start for the sup surfing to start with, because it was quite unstable. And I think you need to get quite a lot of power, into your stroke initially to be able to get up into the foil. And if you haven't got enough stability, I think that can unsettle the board and,
yeah.
You lose it. And also I was doing it without foot straps, being quite stubborn with that. And I think I was also trying to find my feet and where to put my feet, and so there was a lot going on. But once I persevered, and actually once I'd done a bit more wing foiling and I could understand the pumping technique a little bit more to get me up onto the foil, then everything just started to click into place. And so yeah, I've just stuck onto the same board. I use the 610 hypernut, 91 litres, and more recently I've gone onto the dedicated foil board, which is shorter, so it's more condensed, so there's more flotation underneath your feet essentially. So basically when you touch down, you pop up much more easily. Yeah,
So
But
the
obviously this board here is the dedicated one. As you can see, it's thicker in volume. It's got much more volume in a condensed space. It's only 6'4" as opposed to 6'10". But you can't use it for surfing.
No, so I think the message here is really, if someone did have a traditional, I'm not bigging up any brands, but say a Starboard Hypernut that they'd use for SUP surfing, it could be converted, get the box fitted to it. But if you really want to dedicate to learning how to foil, then try to purchase a specific foil board. Matt, so the foot straps, let's open this up. So you've got them on yours, Marie. I don't see, and Ben, I don't see them on yours, but I'm sure you probably do use them. Before we start talking about the actual foils and the wings and our paddle and our balance, the foot straps. So Matt, at what point did you decide that, okay, let's get these foot straps involved now? And are there any safety considerations with that people need to be aware of? Because I suppose technically you're locked in, aren't you?
Yeah, you are locked in. Like I was saying, back to the board, I started on that 8.0 Hypernut. I would use a pen marker to mark where the foil was, so I could reference my feet in the right spot. The second board I purchased had foot strap inserts. That was a 6'10". Then I went on to a 5'9", which had foot strap inserts, but I started to use the foot straps inserts on the 6'10". So this one's 5'6". And ever since my second board, I've been in straps, primarily just the front strap, not both straps. I've tried both straps, but it's very difficult to get 2 feet in. And I don't necessarily think you get a huge amount of benefit because there's a lot of leverage on your front foot rather than your back foot. But yeah, massive performance boost. Is there a danger? There's a little bit of a danger. I have done a little bit of, torsional twisting. But the straps should be relatively loose. They're kind of like, if anyone's seen a kiteboard, they're not like bindings like like the old style foils like Laird used to use. My foot can very easily slide into here and out of here. I've had one occasion where my toe got stuck in and there was a little bit of a pop and a bit of shoot of pain in one of my knees. But that's like the risk with any sport. Benefits, I think, you look at social media and you'll see guys that can foil very well without foot straps. It's just you can get a little bit more leverage on your turns if you are having that front foot strap, and you can also pull the foil because obviously the foil is underneath the water when you first start. As soon as you start to put power down with your paddle by lifting up your knee to your chest by your foot being hooked into the board, you can already start this pumping nature. So I can go out and downwind and catch ocean running swell that doesn't really even break, or waves that might get steep enough for a split second. And I think having a foot strap is a definite key benefit and performance. I don't know if the other guys have had any experience using them, but unless I'm proning, I'm not going to look back for SUP.
So Ben, are you using foot straps then?
Yeah, so the board I'm using now is 60 litres. It's the Starboard 5.6 by 21.5. It's actually a prone surf foil board, but I'm only 70 kilos, so it fits me for SUP foiling and wing foiling. It's a bit sinky getting started, but once I'm up and obviously paddling, then I managed to keep it afloat. But I'm actually running no foot straps on this because I've been using it a lot winging recently, and I find winging a lot more, unless I'm practicing jumps or wanting to try jumps or anything, I find a lot more freedom without straps. Coming from kind of a kiting background where I tend to try or use kind of strapless boards sometimes, and for me, I just prefer that freedom of being able to move my feet around. But I agree with what Matt said about, for sure, SUP foiling, having a front foot strap definitely helps. The way I look at it is kind of, if anyone here is into cycling or anything, and people that use kind of clip-in shoes cycling, when you're pedaling uphill, you're not only pushing with your feet, but you're also pulling slightly, which is the same kind of thing. A lot of leverage on that front foot and helps your pumping massively. But yeah, like I think other than jumps and kind of pumping, for me, I don't feel the need for foot straps.
So in terms of setup with the foot straps, I'm assuming there is a variation, or there are, you know, different setups. You can move it forwards, backwards to suit you. But from my experience of foiling, and again, you guys can offer some advice on this. When we stand up over the foot, we need to be right over that foil. So the foot straps, Matt, they can be adjusted, and maybe Marie, if you can kick in with a little bit of, we'd start talking a little bit about technique and our stance and how that varies quite a lot to when we're doing traditional surfing, because we're surfing a wing. So either one of you guys there, is there any top tips on, you know, the strap position and our, let's talk about a little bit about the stance now.
For me, I've never used straps, so I'm afraid I can't really add to that. I'm like Ben, I really enjoy the freedom of being able to move my feet around. I think that's one of the things I love about SUP, you know, and, you know, having had a foot strap injury last year, I'm not inclined to put my foot in a strap anymore, and I don't find, you know, I find that I can still pump sufficiently. I'm picking up swells downwind, and able to keep the board moving without the strap. I'm pretty sure that I'd probably get more out of the board if I did use a strap, but as I say, I haven't really got any experience with that. In terms of stance, the stance is very different. You're much more inboard compared to you are with surfing. Surfing, you've got to commit yourself into the turns, into the transitions, whereas foiling, actually very, very subtle movements. In fact, you know, if you move too much, that's the first thing you find out, is that it can throw you off. Also, you need to get your weight forwards, which for me, being a windsurfer, I'm used to like leaning back and, you know, leaning back against the power. So I think that was the hardest thing for me to get my brain around, really, is being much more forwards in my stance, and really just fine, subtle movements to get that balance between your front and your back leg. You know, any harsh movements will, you know, you'll soon find out.
I can certainly testify to that. I've, as I say, coming from the surfing background and jumping on the foil thinking, oh, I'll just be like surfing, couldn't be further from the truth. In my experience.
That's it. And I did use foot straps for windsurfing because, you know, I think you do need them for the windsurfing. But I found that I needed my feet really centerboard, and big, the straps, you know, very big. So yeah, I've just enjoyed having that freedom of not having the straps on the SUP.
So Matt, I see you picked up a piece of kit there in your hand, whether you're just playing with that at the minute while we're chatting. But I think the conclusion is with the straps that it's not for everyone, but I completely agree with and understand your theory of creating that lift, and a great analogy there, Ben, with the cycling explanation. Let's talk a little bit about foils, and there's so many. There seems to be now sizes, variations, what aspect of foiling that we're going to do. But I would imagine that the majority of our audience are novice foilers or looking to get into this. What are we looking for then if we're going out to buy a foil for the first time? We've discussed the boards. Maybe a little bit of information on the different types of foils, the setup, the wings, the width, and how they're described would be really helpful, be really useful.
So for me, so talking about foils and also going back to what you were just talking about there, I just want to quickly add in. So on a lot of kind of dedicated foil boards, so this 7.2 Hyperfoil, it's probably quite hard to see on my camera, but there's actually a ridge down the center of the board, down the center of the deck pad, which helped me a lot learning, because kind of gives you a guideline of where your feet need to be, which is pretty much dead center of the board. So not only from a windsurfing kiting background, but I'm from surfing and sup racing, have a race for quite a few years and a big surfing and sup surfing background. So used to kind of moving my feet around and turn the board. As soon as I got on the foil, and I kind of pretty much was taught from the foil firsthand that your feet need to stay in the center of the board pretty much, and trying to move your feet around too much will throw you in. And but for me, I learned on quite a big wing compared to a lot of other people. I think Marie and Matt learned on slightly smaller stuff, but I learned on a 2,000 square centimeter wing, which is quite a big wing. Looked at more for kind of downwinding, but I've managed to learn to control it quite a lot in the surf. And I think the benefit of the big wing is stability. It gives you a lot of stability, learning to foil, which helped me, I think, on my journey, massively helped me with progress. And now I've progressed onto a smaller wing. So I'm on a 1700 now, which I use a lot, pretty much for everything. I hardly touch the 2000 now. And
So,
I think...
Oh, sorry, Ben.
Sorry, yeah. So that 2000, that slightly bigger wing just gives you a bit more stability, I think, and helps. But the downside with that is there is a lot of lift. So unless you're using it in quite very small surf or downwind or behind the boat, I found was okay, then it might seem a bit big.
So, Matt, you got and Ben, I saw you turn your board over just a minute ago. Matt, you've got a piece of the foil there in your hand, or you did have. Maybe just would you be able to give us a little bit of a brief description as to the main parts, the main names of the setup of a foil, and some of the technical aspects of it that we need to consider for the first purchase? I think the audience would find that really useful.
I'm going to set the computer back a little bit. I'm going to run through this really quickly. I'm going to show you some foil wings, but the first thing I'll say is all foils generate lift, whether they be, heavy ones or lightweight ones. The foil that I first started with, my weight is 86 kilograms. Well, it was, it's a bit lighter now, more like 80 kilograms. So it was 1, 2, 4, 5, and the foil weighed 6 kilograms. So it's a pretty weighty foil, but it worked fine. That weight giving lots of stability. Then I jumped on to GoFoil as the brand, and I was using the Kai, which is about 1200. But the difference was that the foil was a lot lighter. The other wing I used a lot was the Iowa, the 1700. And foils are changing literally year on year. Why is that? What you really want as a beginner is you want lift at low speed. You don't want to be going really fast. So Chris, as you said, the wing that I picked up, which was this one, if I was to turn it and point it directly through camera, it's black, so it's going to be quite difficult to see. But this particular foil is a very fast foil. You could get other foils that have 1300 square centimeters of surface area, but the leading edge of this foil is very, very sharp, and it's very thin in profile in the cord. So that means that it goes very, very fast. In the hands of a beginner, that speed would be very scary. I'm now going to pick up obviously a bigger foil, but the leading edge of this particular foil, it's an absolutely huge wing. It's 2,400 square centimeters. So if I go all the way back here, you can kind of see how big it is. But the leading edge is considerably thicker. So this will get you going at a lot lower speed. What speed? Well, this particular wing, I've done foil clinics behind a boat, and we got people up in 7 knots. And that's average, 85, 90 kilogram people at 7 knots. And if you look at the thickness of that wing in comparison to the other one, I don't know if you can see that, they probably look the same, but
no, we can see that. It's a massive difference, yeah.
So that's kind of when you're looking at getting into foiling, it is a little bit of a minefield, and every brand is going to be shouting at you going, buy ours, buy this, buy that. You buy, hopefully buy advice from someone to try a foil. It's not generally going to happen. some people, obviously, I have lots of stuff that people can try. But yeah, front wing size is probably the most important. And depending on where you want to go with it, if you're going to downwind, these high aspect ratio foils you'll see, which are very thin. I did have one, but I didn't bring it out of the van. They're not going to be suitable for beginners. You want an accessible foil. An accessible foil has lots of depth this way. It helps that low speed lift. A high aspect ratio foil is a lot thinner. So the front wing size can vary massively. If I pick up a complete foil, you can see here I've got my front wing on here, which is a 1600, the fuselage and the rear wing. I could speak for another half an hour about rear wings and how that is actually more important than the front wing, but we've got to keep it short. So parts of the foil generally is your front wing that can change, your fuselage, which is usually standard, but some brands will offer shorter ones, make the foil more squirrely, back stabilizer on this particular one, and then we have our mast and our base plate. So some foils are modular, so this being an aluminium one, aluminium base plate, aluminium mast, and then carbon composite front wing and rear wing. And I will change the size of this particular foil depending on the conditions. So that's the 1300. I'm going to hold the 1600 up next to it. And then of this particular foil, which is the Takuma LOL, there is a 1900 wing as well. My favorite is the 1600. And I'm sure everyone like Ben and Marie have favorites of foils. I've just had the experience of trying lots of kit, and I'm now on a real favorite of mine. Yeah, that's my experience. I hope you found that helpful.
I mean, obviously this is extremely technical, and I guess, Ben, I'm not so sure about yourself, but Marie, I'm sure you do have access to be able to try quite a lot of different setups. Matt, obviously, you're a dealer with the foils, so that really does give you a fantastic opportunity to try. Someone coming into this for the first time, what's the kind of initial outlay are we suggesting a retail price? And are you finding that there's now stuff floating around on the second-hand market as this sport develops and people are progressing and upgrading? So what's the average price of a setup for a beginner then at the minute?
£2,000 plus, really, and that's why if you've got a board that could be suitable, then you're only buying the foil. So you can get a foil. I've got a foil in the older model, the first one that I started on, which is around about £500. And you can buy stuff on Alibaba and whatever else. And is it going to work? Yes, it probably will work. Maintenance is key, but yeah, it's not a cheap sport, but you can do it on a shoestring.
Yeah, so I see, Ben, and it looks like you have a couple of setups there. So I'm assuming you've invested quite heavily in your kit. I'm not sure if you're a Starboard sponsored rider. I'm guessing you are. But
yeah.
Would you, is there anything else to add there from Matt's brief introduction into the various different types of foils? It's very technical, that's for sure.
Yeah, so I briefly touched on what I started on, but I think there's obviously sizes is important. Matt would probably have a better idea on something to start on. I'd say something around a 1700 is probably your best bet. It's going to cover a lot of conditions, really. Maybe a little bit of downwind, but mostly probably surf, which is where you're going to start, which is going to give you quite a lot of options. But yeah, I mean, the setup I started on was obviously the Hyperfoil and the 2000. But I think also what Matt said as well is quite a lot of people are retrofitting their boards, their surf sups, and putting boxes in, and that is making it affordable. So you only have to buy the foil. I think second-hand market as well, I think definitely is starting to kind of build. There's there's a few things around on the second-hand market, and wings even are getting quite popular on the second-hand market. Foiling and winging and all this kit is progressing so fast that there's always going to be stuff coming up secondhand. So definitely you could probably, if you look around, you can grab your bargains and grab some good secondhand kit. At the moment, I've got two set up. So I've got this board which I use for prone and all suck, pretty much all my foiling, this 5.6 by 21.5, and then I've got the 1700 and the 2000 that I started on, and this hyperfoil board 7.2, and then the 4-in-1, which I use for windsurf foiling. But yeah, so I think as you progress, your setup grows and you kind of gain more kit. For me, I do pretty much all the sports in foiling, obviously windsurfing, kite foiling, suck, prone, all of it. So yeah, I have quite a large amount of kit, but yeah, I think.
Can I just ask, Marie, maybe you could help with this one. We've talked about the boards. We've just had a discussion about the foils, and I'm sure our audience, if they have any questions, for you guys, Matt, you're a retailer. If we could, how could people approach you direct? What if you could give us your details, maybe at the end of the webinar, so if people have got questions, and any other questions can come through the info at Water Skills Academy. But what we haven't touched upon is at the minute is paddles. So are we doing any variation on our normal SUP paddles? Are they longer? Are we keeping them the same length? Or are we having a blade width which is maybe a little bit wider for that initial explosion to get us up? What's your latest thoughts on that?
Marie?
I haven't really experimented with paddles, to be honest. I've just used my SUP surfing paddle, which I have quite short. It's actually just above chin height. And I found, you'd expect that, once you're on the foil, maybe that's going to be too low, but actually it's not. I find that, if you're finding yourself in just about to touch down, you either pump the board or you're low enough then to actually get a couple of paddle strokes in. But once you're up on the foil, obviously your paddle is useless. It's not really being used for anything. So I just use, I don't know if I've got it in here actually, an Enduro extra small blade, because I find that you need a high turnover. You've already got the resistance of the foil underneath, so it's actually like towing a bucket, so it's actually quite hard work getting into a wave. But so yeah, you want a sort of high turnover of paddle strokes, so I reduce my blade. I've got a small blade for SUP surfing anyway.
And I see, sorry Marie, I've lost you there, whether it's my end or not, but Matt, I see you've picked up a paddle in your hands there.
Yeah, so this is my go-to paddle brand, which is Kinalu. It's probably backwards, I assume, because of the computer. So yeah, Marie was talking about, she uses quite a small blade. I've kind of gone the other way, and this is something that I've blogged about, paddle choice. I have snapped quite a few paddle blades in my foiling, whatever you want to call it, experience. One actually on my last wave in Sri Lanka, luckily, I snapped the blade off. But yeah, 84 square inches for me, but I have used 95 square inches. And this paddle is at pretty much up my height, which is pretty much my go-to SUP surf paddle. So yeah, it's important that the paddle's strong. Takuma, for instance, do paddles which are Kevlar based, which are supposed to be stronger, but I think if you still whack your paddle and you connect your paddle with the foil wing, you're going to do it some damage. So regardless, I think using an aluminium foil, and not aluminium foil, an aluminium paddle's not really going to work, because you really want that power on demand, like Marie was saying. So it's a paddle that you're comfortable with, but just stick with what you have, really. It's more about flying than it is, using the paddle. As long as you can put some solid strokes down, hopefully you're going to get up.
Yeah, thanks for that. Dave sent a question in, and I'm sure you guys can probably see this on your screen. Dave's asking, are the manufacturers of the foils going to start moving to interchangeable parts? So a few wings, excuse me, and mass will fit one fuselage?
Yes. I think, sorry, I don't know if Matt was about to talk then or.
No, saying they already do interchangeable. Everyone does interchangeable. Every brand, you can buy additional wings. Yeah, Ben, you've got a 1700 and a 1300. Is that right?
A 1700 and a 2000. Yeah. So this is the starboard foil setup, which I got 2 front wings. Yeah, the 17 and the 2000, and then 2 back wings, a 270 and a 370. They all fit the same fuselage. Yeah, it's all changed.
So that's good news. That's cost effective then, not like the old school days where you had to buy the complete setup in order to experiment. So you guys have mentioned wing foiling. So Ben and Marie especially. There's a little bit of I'm conscious of time. We've come to the hour already, but if it's okay with you, if we could go for maybe 5 or 10 minutes more, that would be great.
I'm going to put a light on.
So with the wing foiling, how much is like a wing foil, and I guess there's different sizes depending on the strength of the wing, but in a nutshell, what would a beginner, someone who's coming from the windsurfing background, look to be spending on a wing foil?
I think prices vary, but around £500 to £600 for a wing, inflatable wing. I've used most of all of the winging I've done is all on the same sup setup, same sup foil that I always use, which is a 1700. So I haven't had a problem. It doesn't really feel too big for me. It's quite a fast wing. So Matt mentioned about the high aspect wings earlier. And I think people are looking towards those more because they are faster wings. But also want to just briefly touch back on what you were saying about paddles. For me, I just want to talk about what I found is, I think it's important to look at what the kind of width is board that you're on when you're paddling, which is kind of paddling up onto the foil, which is pretty much a surf sup. So I started off and I tried race paddles, tried sup surf paddles, and I'm pretty much on the same paddle as Marie now, so an extra small starboard enduro, because I run it super short, so same as Marie, about chin height. Tried longer race paddles, thinking, when you're up on the foil, and it's all that initial paddle start and surge up on the foil that makes a big difference. So I have quite a high cadence paddle stroke naturally, so having a short one helps me.
Yeah, that's it seems to be a good advice there. Matt, you're not actually experimenting at this stage, I believe, with the wing foiling, but you have mentioned. Oh, you are.
Yeah.
Doing
fully frothing in the winging as well. The wing king, as the Aussies call it.
You've mentioned downwind foiling. So somebody getting into foiling, I'm assuming you guys would recommend that let's get out and learn in the nice, safe, small conditions rather than, putting ourselves into this downwind environment. But for you, Matt, I've been seeing videos that Dave Kalama's been posting downwind prone foiling. So he's actually been trying to paddle in to catch these rollers, and it looks pretty difficult. Have you had any experience with that?
Yeah, a little bit. That, I saw another question, evolution, that's come in from Ben. I think that what the wings are doing is they're allowing people into that downwind. Downwind foiling is difficult. You're reading, like any downwinding on an SUP, your knowledge of the ocean is paramount. Like you asked Maria about paddling the Celtic Crossing, it's hard work spotting the right bumps. And that's even on a 14-foot board. Now you're on a board which is, 3 times less, 5.5 foot, and you've got a hydrofoil. So your scrutiny on the type of bumps which yeah, if you look at that Dave Kalama movie, anyone, he's now paddling in on a prone board with giant hand paddles so that he can paddle quicker to get up on foil. But that's where foiling's going. That's the frontier. Why is it the frontier? We talked about speed, and that's where you are going to get the most speed. Other than towing yourself into a 30-40 foot wave, it's not really on, you know, the agenda for most people. But riding ocean running swell is, and speeds of, you know, probably 30 kilometers an hour, especially in Hawaiian island chains, places where the trade winds blow. That's the frontier. So the question that came in about evolution, where do you see the industry development? I already know it's all about, you know, it's not so much about boards. Boards can chop and change. You're just going to stand on something that's, you know, comfortable for you. It's about the leading edge. It's about this. I've seen some foils that are due out from Takuma, which when I saw the picture, I was just like, what, really? And the guy who's the owner of the company was just like, oh my God, it's unbelievable, blah, blah, blah. And it's, you know, it's amazing hearing this. And actually the design from this has come from nature, believe it or not, because, you know, we don't know much about the ocean. We want to play on it. But now we're able to fly across the ocean. You know, you just have to, if anyone wants to watch a good movie, if you do a little bit, I can't remember the name of it, but it's the start of last year's Molokai ocean race. And there's a group of, I think, around about 10 to 15 foilers. And you'll see them literally from the word go. You know, one of the guys who's actually using a Takuma, he gets up on foil within 5 or 10 meters, and then he's pumping this foil probably about 300 meters toward the wind line. So this is completely flat water. As soon as they get to the wind line, their speed is doubling from, you know, their flat water speed, and it's just all inspiring. So that's the frontier, and that's why foils are changing, is because people want to go faster and they want to get out, you know, away from the aggro that we all experience in that surf environment. The open ocean is, you know, alluring. It's definitely tempting, but it's all about support. So people that want to get into downwind foiling, yes, it needs to be a safe route. If you can get safety boat cover, even better, because then that boat could always give you a little bit of a tow and a whip in. But that's, you know, it is all, it's very focusing. You know, Marie can tell you, you know, about the Celtic crossing. Would you consider doing the Celtic crossing on a foil, Marie?
Not at the moment, but I would. I would love to. But like you say, downwind foiling is another level. It's very difficult to harness that energy. It's a combination of fitness. I think it is very energy thirsty, but it's also obviously a lot of it's technique. And yeah, I mean, I've done quite a lot of downwind racing in Australia, and this year was the first time that they introduced foiling into the King of the Cut race, which is a 24-kilometre downwind race, point to point. And the week leading up to that race, we were all practicing, you know, the runs, the half cut run, and you know, you'd have these foilers they'd take off half an hour after you, and they'd just overtake you and leave you standing, weeping their way past you, and literally they were surfing. They got up once and they would surf one wave the whole way, and they wouldn't touch down once. So I mean, it's an amazing skill to have, but it's from my understanding, it's very difficult. But that for me is the ultimate, definitely downwind.
Don't you think if you were to be given a wing, the Celtic crossing with a wing would all of a sudden be easier in a, you know, to do?
Oh yeah, for sure, yeah. And I think the wing is a great way to get into downwind foiling, because you can lose the wing, and actually if you've got the surfing skills as well, you basically lose the wing, you just let go of it, let it float, and
They're quite expensive
as well. Not as expensive as a foil.
well, you're tethered still.
Great value for money.
Maybe we should, we should be looking at having one of these e-foils that Matt mentioned at the very start of this webinar. I'd like to kind of wrap it up in a minute, but the e-foiling is the motor there that you've got holding up right now, Matt. I mean, that is really taking my interest. So, Ben, and I'm not sure if you've had any experience on this, and Matt, I'm not sure if you're the only chap that's got these in the country, but how about a little bit of a brief description on the e-foils, and those of us that won the lottery last week, maybe we could afford one, but if you could give us a bit of information on that, and then I think what we'll do, guys, is we'll wrap that up after that, because you know, we've gone over the hour and it's been really interesting and we could talk all night, but I'm just mindful of your time. So Matt, a little bit about the e-foil.
Yeah, so it's kind of tying into all the information that Marie has spoken about, Ben has spoken about wings and stuff like that. There's the brand that I've had a go on, not saying you have to consider buying or having a go on this particular one, but mine is Takuma. The parts are obviously the board. You have the hydrofoil, which is, I would class as the wing, fuselage and rear wing. The part that I held up before, Chris, and for everyone else watching, this is the motor unit. So we have the mast with the base plate, and I have a coupling, and this goes through the bottom of the board. So this bolts into the bottom of the board. This goes through the board, and then a series of sort of cables connect it all together. You've got the prop guard and the propeller, and then obviously your rear wing goes on the end of that. So that's your propulsion unit. Next is what it's all about, really, is battery technology. That's where the big money's made. This is the same battery that Tesla use in some of their cars. So it's a pretty heavy battery. It's around about 10K. And you can see the lights showing you how much battery there is in this. It takes around about 3 to 5 hours to charge, and then you're looking at around about an hour and a half of riding time. The board that Takuma do, the current board, there is a new board due out, which is 5.4. The boards that we have in are 6.5. Pretty corky at 150 litres. And then once everything is assembled, it's a heavy old unit, I can tell you that. It's around about 40 kilograms. You don't notice that at all once you're out and foiling, but obviously carrying it down to the water is a bit of a pain. But this is the only thing. So it's just you stood on a board holding on to this. So Takuma paired with BB Talking. So this has a little trigger here, and then it has a speed dial. So I would literally squeeze my trigger and then set my speed. And as soon as I fall off and my finger comes off the trigger, I then have to set the speed dial back down to 0 again before I can then squeeze the trigger and then set my speed. And there's a little silver button here, which is a boost button. And there's a battery readout there. Obviously it's not switched on at the moment, that indicates to me remote battery and battery inside of the board. Like I said, around about an hour and a half. This is fully waterproof. The way I teach it is with a Bluetooth headset. So I could be buzzing around and someone else could be buzzing around, and I can be like, right, just try and shift your weight forward, you know, like an inch, you know, and they'll do that, and all of a sudden they'll go, whoa, it's so much easier. So it's a really good experience to pick up foiling quite quickly. But like I said, it is expensive, like you said, Chris. But the evolution is that the boards are getting smaller, the batteries are getting smaller, so that the boards are becoming a lot more carvy. Takuma is, you know, one of the leading brands. There's two other brands that are leading the way, Flight and Lift, but they'll set you back close to £10,000 or over. So yeah, it's definitely a lottery win.
Whoa, I was just going to say, I want one. I'm going down the shop now to do my lottery ticket. But so yeah, that's the price, around £10,000. But okay. So like any technology, as this evolves, I'm sure more people come to the marketplace, the prices will drop. And Matt, I would love to be up there on that Gower coastline having an experience on all of that stuff. But even though we can't do that right now, so that would have to wait. But brilliant, that sounds fantastic. So I'm going to wrap up the webinar now. I see, hopefully our audience can see that if you need to ask any questions to Matt direct, He's put his web address up there, which is standuppaddleboarding.co.uk. And for Marie and Ben, I'm not sure whether you want people to contact you direct. If not, they can come through info@waterskillsacademy.com. I don't know, are you guys teaching any of this stuff to beginners, or is it at this stage just just personal use? Are you providing any lessons, or is that something you're thinking about, or not just yet?
Yeah, so for me, I run a SUP and surf and race coaching company anyway, down here in the southwest of the UK, called SUP Coaching UK. You can contact me there on Facebook, or I'll drop my email in the chat. Feel free to get in touch with me with any questions you may have. But yeah, for sure on the cards to soon start teaching foiling and wing foiling as well, massively. Would love to try and set that up soon.
Yeah, brilliant. So there's Matt's emails come up there. It's mail@foilsurfing.co.uk. Just repeat, Ben, what was the name of your business?
SUP Coaching UK, so fairly simple.
Yeah,
fairly easy to remember. Probably on Facebook is the best, or I am on Instagram. I'll just drop my email in the chat here.
Yeah. So for our audience that are listening, there is a wealth of knowledge and experience here with these guys. And I definitely would say, tap into that while it's there. Hopefully we, at our WSA seminar, if we're allowed to run this in October, which we're hoping we are, it's going to be on Hailing Island this coming autumn. These three guys and girls will hopefully be there, and we'll have a foiling session into the schedule, which would be pretty much well attended, I think, now. So look out for that. The information will be on the WSA website. We've got some development sessions again on Wednesday. So I think, Marie, you're next up next Wednesday doing a webinar on some injuries and prevention and warm-up stuff. And then the following Friday, the next Friday, a week today, we have got Steve West talking about the forward paddle stroke. So brilliant. Thanks ever so much for everyone for listening in. It's really, really, really appreciate your time, you guys, for doing this. And thanks again to the audience. We hope we're keeping you engaged and informed with a series of topics. We're trying to spread it out and choose different topics as much as we can. Anyone's got any suggestions, email us. Anything you want to hear about or us talk about, send it through. So I'll wrap it up there and say, well, good day from down here, but good night. Time for a gin for you guys. And thanks very much.
Yeah, thank you guys for everyone listening.
Thanks, guys.
And helped. Cheers.
Happy foiling. Stay safe.
Loyal to the foil.
Bye. See ya. Bye.